Hello friends, welcoming you all back to GIA's Potential Builder Current Affairs Sprints Program Session 6. These are the 10 topics which we are going to discuss today. So in the description, as usual, we are providing you with our Telegram channel link where we are posting questions every day. So for exam related updates and for quick revision, follow us on YouTube as well as our Telegram channel. This is the contact number of the institute where you can call for exam related, where you can call for admission related queries. So without any further delay, let's go into the topics of today. The first topic which we are going to discuss today is about LIDAR technology. So let's first see why it's in news. The reason behind it being in news is that National High Speed Rail Corporation Limited has carried out a ground survey using the LIDAR technology to map or to get the report for the Delhi Varanasi high speed corridor. So for Delhi Varanasi high speed corridor, LIDAR technology has been used to get the ground survey. So earlier, this LIDAR technology has been used for the first time between Mumbai and Ahmedabad rail corridor. So here also we have used the LIDAR technology, but this is the first time in which high speed rail project has been making use of this LIDAR technology. So another reason being it in news is that in UK there is a valley called Tamar Valley in UK, which is in the south of England. This Tamar Valley is a World Heritage Site which is given by UNESCO. And this Tamar Valley holds Rome and iron sites, many Rome and iron sites, and this is the reason why it's been given the World Heritage Site. This is being listed under the World Heritage Site, and the archaeologists of UK has been continuing the archaeological exploration of this Tamar Valley even during the COVID pandemic using the LIDAR technology. And these are the two reasons why this LIDAR technology has been in news. So the full form of LIDAR technology is nothing but light detection and ranging. And the working of LIDAR technology is from this place where this lidar is placed, this equipment is placed, it sends laser beams of light. So this is the working of lidar technology. Lidar is basically based on pulsed laser beams of light. That is, light is sent as a pulsed laser beam, and with this the beams are sent, it hits the specific targets. Maybe if like with the help of helicopters, with the help of flights or drones, we are sending the rays, so it hits the object in the ground or wherever we want to detect, and then striking the object, it immediately gets reflected back. And this measurement or this speed measurement, the time between these hitting and getting back the required observations, we are able to measure the distances. So basically, LIDAR uses pulsed laser beam for measuring distances or other ranges. And since it uses GPS, laser, and a scanner, the precision of this technology is much higher. Since it gives a very high accurate data, this LIDAR has its presence in many fields like agriculture, even in soil health card. Government has been saying that it wants to use advanced technology to measure or to get the information about the soil. So soil health card is basically like GPS and other things to get the information or nutrient content of the soil, and based upon that the required nutrient support can be given to the soil for the growth of crops. So it can be used there. It can be used to get the aerial information. Then it can be used to get in sea floor explorations also, this lidar technology can be used. And in such areas, this lidar technology has a much wider scope. Since it's a science and tech based topic, if in exam there can be questions like where the lidar technology can be used. So can be means it's a science and technology topic and it has a wider presence, so you can go for all the options which is given. So lidar is not new to us. Lidar was first used in NASA's Apollo 15, a spacecraft for exploring moon. Apollo 15, it's a spacecraft for exploring moon. But since much of research was not done in this technology, its presence was not there after during those years, but now it has gained its importance back. So this is all about lidar. But one thing we need to note about lidar is that it can't perform well in fog, snow, rainy, and dusty environments or dusty areas. So lidar has been used in driverless cars and mobile phones. But due to these backlogs, along with lidar, we need to use other such technologies so that during the fog or snow, if the lidar technology doesn't support, other technology can be used in that place. So this self-driving cars and driverless cars are making use of this lidar technology. So this basically uses speed of light to measure the distances. So speed of light is 3 into 10 power 8 meter per second is the speed of light. So this lidar plus other this lidar plus other data helps to get the precise three-dimensional information about shape of earth as well as characteristics of earth. And with this, many explorations and many developments in science can be done. So other two technologies that are in use are sonar, which uses the sound waves to get distances, and the other one is radar, which uses radio waves. So sonar is basically sound navigation and ranging, and radar is basically radio detection and ranging. These are the technologies that are much wider in use nowadays. So let's move on to the next topic. One more information about lidar is that it is basically of two types. One is the topographic data. In topographic data, we are going to get the land information. So one is topography and the other one is bathymetric. So bathymetry is used for seafloor exploration basically. So in bathymetric data, how we are going to use is that we are going to make use of green light, which is water penetrating. So water penetrating green light can be used to get the information about seafloor and river beds. So this is how for land we are basically using topographic data, which uses near infrared rays. Okay, so this is all about lidar. And one more thing is that recently to prevent man-animal conflict, this lidar technology has been used so that the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries or other conservation and protection sites can be provided with necessary water and food or fodder for the animals to prevent the man-animal conflict. So these are the government initiatives. So let's move on to the next topic. So the next topic is about Netra. Netra. So Netra is basically a ISRO project. The reason behind it in news is that this would have been initiated by ISRO recently. It's initiated by ISRO. So this is the reason why it's in news. And there is also a Netra Control Center which is set up in Bangalore. So the full form of NETRA is Network for Space Object Tracking and Analysis. So this is basically to detect debris and also to inform India about other hazards that is possible in space. So to detect debris in space and other hazards to Indian satellites that can happen in space. So this is basically given by the ISRO. It's a early warning system to detect space debris. So there are also other initiatives globally called as Remove Space Debris by EU. This remote space debris uses multiple technologies and multiple methods to remove the space debris. Like it is actually a trial and error basis, or many technologies can be used in this EU remove space debris, and those can be implemented to get information about the space debris and how to destroy this space debris. So this Netra project is of India, which basically also is helpful for space situational awareness. So what is happening in space, what kind of problems can be created by debris to our satellites, or if our satellites burst, what kind of things we need to do to get rid of these satellites. So these are the things which are done in the space situational awarenesses. So the awareness. So this Netra project helps India to become much more efficient in this space situational awareness. Only 3 countries have this kind of tracking system. One is US, the other is Russia, and the other being EU. So these are the 3 countries which have Europe. Sorry, Europe. These are the 3 countries which have. That's what Europe. So these are the 3 countries which have this facilities. So the main aim of this Netra is to capture 36,000 kilometers of geostationary orbit, where this space debris are large in amount, because these are the areas where communication satellites largely operate. So that is the reason why this Netra wants to explore that area. And in this Netra, what it's basically made of is that a long range telescope is placed in Leh, and another radar is placed in the northeastern region. So globally, there is also another initiative by US and Canada called NORAD. This is basically by US and Canada. Its full form is North American Aerospace Defense Command. What this command does is that it provides certain information, some specific selective information to other countries regarding the space debris. Space debris are much worry to the country, because these space debris can collide with other planets or stars, or it can also collide with the orbiting satellites, and this can create problem to the earth. So these are the reasons why this kind of object has to be eradicated completely in space. So these are the other initiatives by India to detect or to get the awareness about this space debris. So space debris are also called as space junk, which are unwanted materials in space. So this one such initiative is orbit computation of resident space object for situational awareness. This is basically to predict the collision for space debris, like to predict the space debris collision with other planets or with other satellites on Earth. Basically, space debris are of 2 types. One is natural and the other is artificial. Natural space debris are caused due to this bursting of stars or collision of stars that can create space debris. Artificial are done by the human made things. So it's created by man, like sending of satellites. The satellites can burst. These kind of things causes space debris in space. Like recently, the China space debris. China created a space station in Taiwan. That space station called Taiwan, which has bursted in space, and that happens to be a space debris. Even ASAT of India, anti-satellite of India, has also created a space debris, which we will be seeing in next news. So this space situational program, this is to be completed within 2 years, for which the Indraprasth Institute received funding from the National Supercomputing Computing Mission. So this National Supercomputing Mission has contributed some fund to the Indraprasth Institute, which is going to carry out this orbit computation to basically detect the collision of space debris. So this National Supercomputing Mission is under Departments of Science and Technology. So the next program is Digantara. So this Digantara is nothing but a space startup company. So this is a first air and space surveillance startup. It's a startup company to for surveillance of air and space. So this Digantara has come out with an initiative called in orbit first in orbit space debris monitoring program. So this program makes use of LIDAR technology. So this is a first in orbit program, and this is for real-time monitoring of space debris, making use of nano satellites. So this basically makes use of nano satellites to detect these debris in the low Earth orbit. Okay, so this is also of much importance because India is known for cost effective and affordable space satellites. So this Digantara company is making nano satellites. So this is a welcomed initiative by India, and that is the reason why This Dikantara has been selected for Society for Innovation and Development Incubation Program, which is happening in IISc Bangalore, that is Indian Institute of Science Bangalore, for which this has been selected. So this is all about Netra and space debris. There is another project in the name of Netra, but this project, this is Netra, this is by DRDO. So this project name is network trafficking. Actually, this is a software to check internet trafficking, and this is done by DRDO, but this Netra project is done by ISRO. So it's a software for network trafficking. Actually, what it does is it is done by Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Unit. So Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics under the DRDO, and this information is used by our raw and intelligence agencies to know about network trafficking in order to prevent cyber crimes and other internet related crimes. So this is another project, and this is all about Netra project. So let's move on to the next issue. So the next issue is about ASAT. First, let's see why it is in news. The reason behind ASAT in being in news is that the Indian Post, the Department of Post, has released a My stamp of this anti-SAT missile. So anti-SAT missile has been released, and this was released on Engineers Day, which happens to be on 15th of September. So this Engineers Day is celebrated on birth anniversary of Mokshagundam Vishwesvaraya, who is a civil engineer, and he is also known as the Diwan of or a chief engineer of Mysore State. He was known as the chief engineer of Mysore State, and he was well known for his idea of block system for dams, which is a automatic closing system for dams when they get completely filled to avoid floods. So he is known for that, and he is also a Bharat Ratna awardee. So this is all about the Engineers Day. So coming back to anti-satellite, this anti-satellite is an interceptor missile to destroy or jam the satellites on space. If suppose there appears to be some enemy satellites. Enemy satellites are satellites launched by the countries recognized as enemy countries, and if they take any confidential information, or it is seen that it can be a threat to safety of India, these anti-satellites are fired so as to destroy those missions. So this is all. This is about anti-satellite, and India has tested its first anti-satellite in the year 2019 called Mission Shakti, which is developed by DRDO. So basically, anti-satellite is by DRDO, and India happens to be the fourth country to acquire such capability. So first country to have it is USA, second is USSR or Russia, and third is China. These are the three countries which have the anti-satellites. So it can destroy low Earth orbit satellite of 300 kilometer, and it is completely indigenous one, and it has a it is a three-stage missile. So this is about anti-satellite. So other thing is that the reason being it in news is that actually these anti-satellite can be a reason for creating space debris. The reason is when these anti-satellites are fired, they go and hit the enemy target or satellites, whatever is creating a trouble, and this can lead to debris. And this testing happened in 2019, has attracted opposition from many countries due to the debris being created by anti-satellites or this Mission Shakti. But India defended by saying that in low Earth orbit, if this was tested by firing a satellite in low Earth orbit, and if a satellite is being destroyed in low Earth orbit, then the debris created due to this satellite will be falling back to Earth, and it won't create any problem since it will vanish at a much earlier phase. So this was the proposal by India. So the reason why this issue has been raised is that India is a signatory to Outer Space Treaty. So Outer Space Treaty is nothing but a treaty which emphasizes on useful and peaceful exploration of space. So it's for useful and peaceful exploration of space by countries. So they can benefit from the usage of space, but not they cannot wage a war against countries. So space should not be a platform for waging a war, but it can be used for beneficial purposes. So it came into effect in the year 19 it came in the year 1967, 10th October 1967. India ratified this outer space treaty. India ratified this treaty in the year 1982. So this is the reason why, since India is a ratified country to this treaty, that is the reason why India has been getting such criticism for firing the anti-satellite. So this is all about anti-satellite. So now let's move on to the next issue. So the next issue is about Seabed 2030 project. The reason behind it in being in news is that about one-fifth of the seabed has been mapped in the ocean floor. World's ocean floor, about one-fifth of the world's ocean floor has been mapped. This is a global initiative. This is done by Japan's Nippon, which is a not-for-profit organization, as well as GEPCO, which full form is General Bathymetric Chart of the Oceans. So this is a kind of chart that maps world's ocean, and the first chart has been created in the year 1903. So this is a follow-up of the program. So 1903 is basically done by IHO, which is International Hydrographic Organization. IHO, International Hydrographic Organization. Plus Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. These are the two bodies which are incorporated into it. So mapping into this, so by UNESCO. So this chart was created in the year 1903, which was initiated by Prince Albert of Monaco. So this coming to this International Hydrographic Organization, this is an intergovernmental organization which works to ensure that all seas, oceans and navigable waters are surveyed and charted. Basically, these were survey and charting of the world's ocean. And India happens to be the member of this International Hydrographic Organization, which was established in the year 1921. So India is a member to this organization, and it was established in the year 1921. And this program of GEPCO was launched, this program of seabed was launched in the year 2017 and in the UN Ocean Conference. So the reason behind this being initiated is that around the survey of the ocean, this is the point, survey of ocean according to the modern standards has gone up to 19% from 6%. So this is the reason why this seabed 2030 project has been initiated in the year 2017, and it says that before 2030, by 2030, the whole seafloor will be surveyed. So this is aligned with the SDG goal 14, which is Sustainable Development Goal 14, which says that conserve and sustainable use of ocean, seas, and other marine resources. So this program basically will bring together all bathymetric data. As I said, bathymetry is about measuring of sea floors. So getting data about the sea floor is bathymetry. So this program says that it will bring together all bathymetric data to produce a proper and a definitive map of world ocean floors by 2030, and makes it available to all. So basically all the countries will be able to get this bathymetric data. So this is all about this seabed 2030 project. But there are two projects which are done by India. One is the airline mapping of Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep Islands. So this is basically to airline mapping of the two islands of India, Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep. So this is basically to get a better picture of ocean floor of the where these islands nearby these islands, and this is done by INCOIS, which is a autonomous body under Ministry of Environment, sorry, Ministry of Earth Sciences. So this is a autonomous body under Ministry of Earth Sciences. Its headquarters in Hyderabad, which was established in the year 1999. So this is basically to get the better picture of this seafloor of near Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep Islands. So another project is regarding Deep Ocean Mission. So this Deep Ocean Mission is for exploring the deep sea around the Indian Ocean. So this is by India. This is done by Ministry of Earth Sciences. It's an 8,000 crore project to basically get the information about exploring the seabeds or exploring the seafloor of Indian Ocean. And seafloor exploration, basically it helps to get about informations about polymetallic nodules, which are basically manganese nodules, and these nodules are spread all over the sea floor in abundance. And also this is also useful for getting the deep fishing areas and completely exploration of deep mining activities and those things. So it is to explore the resources of sea. And also this seabed project as a whole is to get the information about the sea, how the seas can be used for profitable purposes. So this is all about seabed 2030 project. And since these projects are linked to that, little bit we need to know about these projects. So let's move on to the next issue. So the next issue is about Tulip platform. This Tulip platform, the reason being hit in news is that this has been launched recently, and this was mentioned in the budget of 2020 to 21. 2020 to 21 has this information about this project, and this is coordinated by Ministry of HRD, that is Human Resource Development, which is now renamed as Education Ministry, and also the Housing and Urban Affairs. AICTE under the Education Ministry is coordinating its technical support to this project. So it gives the technical coordinating technically to this project. So this is the thing, and this platform is basically for urban learning. So it's a urban learning internship program. So it is to provide opportunity to fresh graduates. To fresh graduates, this provides an opportunity in all urban local bodies as well as smart cities. So it's to create the talent pool in various fields of urban local urban planning, transport engineering, and those things, as well as it is also a job creation drive. So our fresh graduates are benefited from this. They were in municipal finance, like environmental related issues related to urban planning. What are all the urban issues can be solved by encouraging youths through this Tulip platform, basically engaging the youths to solve India's urban problem. And this also fulfills the MHRD and AICTE's goal of 1 crore successful internship, 1 crore successful internship by the year of 2025. So this is also helpful for this program. And this is a experimental learning opportunity program. So coming to AICTE is a advisory board. So it's an advisory board under Ministry of Education right now, and it was created in the year 1945, and it's helpful in technical education. There are many places where AICTE is coordinated, where many schemes that are implemented through AICTE. If any new schemes are there in news, we will be discussing about it specifically. So this is all about Tulip platform. It is a experimental learning platform. So there is also one more, not entirely related to this experimental learning, but there is also an initiative called Shreyas by Government of India, in which it's a scheme for promoting apprenticeship. So this is basically a scheme for promoting apprenticeship in graduates. So in graduates, What this scheme does is that it provides industry opportunities, industry apprenticeship, and opportunities for general graduates. So not basically for freshers, it is for all the graduates, but TULIP is specifically for fresh graduates. This program was introduced in the year 2019, and it comes under uh, this basically is a program that is operationalized by Ministry of Labor plus MSDE. Helps MSDE and Ministry of Labor helps in implementing this program basically. But as a whole, this program was given by Ministry of HRD at that time. Now Ministry of Education, but it was initiated by Ministry of HRD, and Ministry of Labor and MSDE will be helping in coordinating this program by providing skill training to the youth. So this program comes into phase in the higher education phase itself. So when the students are in their higher education itself, they can be they can enroll into this program, and they can work as an apprenticeship. They can apprentice, and they can get the required industry related skills. They can all this is also a on job exploration platform, on job work exposure platform, where they get stipend as well. So this is basically done at the education timing itself, higher education timing itself. So let's move on to the next issue. This is all about TULIP platform. So this is a picture which helps you to understand the program easily. So just go through it once. So coming to next issue, it's about Indian GOR. The reason behind the news is two reasons. One is a population exercise report has been done in the Nilgiris region of Tamil Nadu, basically Nilgiris, and this is the one of the reason why it's been used. And it is also this population exercise report is also being helped by World Wildlife Fund for India, which is a charitable trust working for enhancing the wildlife all over the world. So coming the other reason being, in West Bengal, with the help of sniffer dogs, it has been found that this wild in this Indian gaur are being poached for their meat and for other leather related purposes. So these are the two reasons why it's in news. So a population exercise report is being conducted. So the IUCN status of this animal is vulnerable, and it's basically found in South and Southeast Asia, and it is the tallest species of wild cattle. It's a schedule 1 animal of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which uh, which attracts high degree of protection, as well as it is a state animal of Goa. So for food, handicrafts and other things, medicinal purposes as well, this animal is being pouched. And this happens to be the first population exercise in the Nilgiris region. So there has also been a conservation center for this animal, conservation center, conservation breeding center basically for this gaur, which was started in the Mysore Zoo. So this conservation breeding center started in Mysore Zoo by the Central Zoo Authority. So there is a small difference between, apart from this, there is a small difference between two types of buffaloes. One is the swamp buffalo, and one other is the river buffalo. So basically, this swamp buffalo is being used for meats, and this river buffalo is for milk. These basically all the buffalo in India and Far East are river buffalo, and this swamp buffalo are found in the native waters of Southeast Asia. So mostly India has river buffaloes. So this is all about Indian gaur. So know the IUCN status, and the it attracts Schedule 1 attraction, and this is the first population exercise conducted in Nilgiris. So this is all about it, and it has a breeding center in Mysore, which is Mysore Zoo, which is coordinated by the Central Zoo Authority. So let's move on to the next issue. The next issue is about Blue Flag certification, and this Blue Flag certification is done by Foundation of Environmental Education, which is basically in Denmark. This Blue Flag certification was first done in France in the year 1985. The reason being it in use is that the two beaches of Karnataka, basically Kasarkod and Padubidri, these two beaches has also been included into the 8 beaches. So these from Karnataka are also included into the 8 beaches which have recently got the blue flag certification. And so in this is of important because India has become the first country to get the blue flag certification for 8 beaches in a single attempt. This is one of the reason, and this blue flag certification is awarded for cleanest, safest, and environmental beaches of the world. So these are the recent 8 beaches which have got this blue flag certification. So this is to develop beaches on a ecotourism model. And in this what happens is that this ecotourism will promote safe bathing and healthy environment for environmental beaches for promoting tourism. So coming to the next thing, the highest country with blue flag certification is Spain, which is followed by Greece and France. So Greece and France are the other next second and third countries to have the highest number of beaches. So Spain has 560 beaches basically as blue flag certified beaches. So other thing is the Chandrabhaga was the first beach which is in Odisha to get this blue flag certification. It was the first beach from India to get the blue flag certification. Other Asian countries which have this blue flag certification is Japan, South Korea, and UAE. As a whole, there has to be there are 33 criteria which are to be followed to get this blue flag certification. Few are voluntary criteria and few are mandatory criteria. One criteria is that pet animals and other animals will not be allowed in this area to get the blue flag certification. So these are few things about blue flag certification. Coming to this foundation of environment education in Denmark, actually it's a not for profit and a non-governmental organization. Okay, so these are all about the blue flag certification. So this blue flag certification is kind of a trademark that is provided to ensure that beaches are clean, environmental friendly, and safe in the whole world. So let's move on to the next issue. So the next issue is about electoral bond. The reason being in news is that electoral bonds have been criticized that it's not completely corruption free or so. It can lead to black money market and that thing. That is one of the reason why electoral bonds are being in news, as well as elections have been conducted in 4 states of India: Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and Assam. And during these elections, there has been a petition that this electoral bonds must not be distributed at this time, as it will promote favoritism. But high courts have not taken into consideration of selling of electoral bonds. So first, what are electoral bonds is that this is a financial instrument for making donations to political parties. So the advantage of electoral bonds is that the donor name will not be specified. So this will ensure that there is no unbiasedness of a political party towards the people. So this is one of the reason and the most advantageous reason why electoral bonds are being promoted. Electoral bonds basically are given in the multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, etc. And it's only given by SBI. So electoral bonds are only promoted by SBI, and electoral bonds are given in 4 months of a year. So only during 4 months of a year it is promoted, basically January, April, July, and October, and it is open for only 10 days. So a person can buy these electoral bonds for only 10 days in these 4 months of a year, and these are specified by the government. And the electoral bonds can be withdrawn by, like the money spent on these given for these electoral bonds can be got by the political party we should be taken by the political party within 15 days. Otherwise these bonds will not be allowed to redeemed by the political party. So this can be used for making donation only to political party that are registered as 29A of the representation. So it is only for registered political parties and not for other parties. So the eligibility for providing these electoral bonds is a citizen of India or a body that is incorporated in India. That is a company which is based on India uh, can buy these electoral bonds, and it should be done only on the fulfillment of know your customer norms, and so it should be done by a payment through a bank account only. So these are kind of in the nature of a promissory notes, and these are interest free banking instruments. So these are the important facts about electoral bonds. And other thing is that these the donor names are not specified in this electoral bonds, and this has also been a issue because recently a petition would have been filed to like to the information central information commission. There would have been a request to release the name of these donors, but this is against the central information commission would have said this is against the provision of the electoral bonds, like disclosing the name of the donors is against the electoral bonds, and hence it will not be disclosing the names. So this is all about electoral norms, but since elections have been in news, so please go through this nicely. So only specified branches of SBI are allowed to give these electoral bonds. So coming to the next issue, the next issue is about African swine flu. The reason behind this in news is that in Assam, pigs would have been affected by this African swine flu, which would have been reported. So African swine flu is a highly contagious disease, but the advantage is that it doesn't infect humans. So it spreads from animal to animal, and it's a fatal animal disease. So it spreads from basically from animal to animal. So this was first detected in Africa in 1920. The major problem with this is that this can cause transboundary infections. So it can spread from one area to other. So it was detected in pigs recently in Vietnam pigs. So this can travel to other regions as well. So the only possible thing to eradicate this African swine flu is to kill the animals. Culling is killing of animals, killing of animals. So this is the how it is done is that if an animal is in a group, so the animals which are in its close vicinity are also killed. So this is how killing of animals happens. And you could have recently also seen a news on uh, hens and chickens getting infected due to the swine flu in Kerala recently. So this kind of swine flus are increasing nowadays, and this African swine flu is not related to other swine flu. This African swine flu, and earlier there was a classic swine flu. These two are not related to H1N1 swine flu, that is H1N1. So these two are not related to that. These are different two types of different flus. Basically, it infects both domestic and wild pigs. And this African swine flu has been listed in World Organization for Animal Health, Terrestrial Animal Health Code. So there it has been reported. So it is basically called as OIE. So OIE is basically an intergovernmental organization that is for improving animal health worldwide. So it's an intergovernmental organization. India is a member to it, and this has around 182 members and 182 members, and it has its headquarters in Paris, which is in France. So the reason, though it doesn't affect humans, why it becomes important or why it requires attention is that it can have an economic effect on countries, because the meat production can get affected, and when it spreads from one country to another, so the trade and everything will be largely affected, and it can also affect other animals, thus creating trouble to the ecosystem as well as the biodiversity, and it can also lead to a loss of many animals. So this is the reason why it's of much importance, and culling of these infected animals are done. So let's move on to the last topic of today. So this is a pick on this African swine flu, and if you can see, this African swine flu is basically this virus. It's a viral disease, and this virus is resistant to low temperature. So it's highly resistant, and these are the symptoms. Not much of importance, but you can just go through this report. And according to OIE, it is said that 24% have been reported with this disease since 2016. So basically, it broke out in Africa, Europe, and Asia. So let's go on to the last issue. And these are basically caused by ticks. So let's go on, move on to the last issue. Coming to the last topic, National Baseline Geoscience Data Generation Program. The reason being it is news is that the Geographical Survey of India would have initiated its flagship initiative called National Geoscience Data Repository. This National Geoscience Data Repository is a repository of all geo information. All geoscience information will be stored in this NSDR data. So it's a complete program where everything is going to, every geoscience data is going to get stored. So this, for creating this National Geoscience data repository, the GSA, that is the Geographical Survey of India, has come up with three initiatives called three ambitious initiatives for this national, for creating this deposit. Three initiatives are: first is National Geochemical Mapping, National Geochemical Mapping. Second is National Geophysical Mapping. Third is National Aero Geophysical Mapping Program. So these are the three initiatives which with GSA XCOM to develop this repository, and this repository is going to contain all the geoscience information, not only done by GSA but also other organizations which are working on this geoscience. So basically, GSA is the uh, organization which was started in the year 1851, and it's basically, first it was started for knowing about the coal deposits for railways. Its headquarters is in Kolkata, and due to its growing geoscience survey, this organization has expanded his scope. It has also many other regional centers. As of now, it is under Ministry of Mines. So initially it was started to get the coal based information. So what it's going to do is that it's going to adopt deep penetration geophysical techniques to get the crustal architecture for deep seated mineral targeting. So get this deep seated mineral targeting, it is going to conduct a national geochemical data where through chemical informations it's going to get the information about the natural resources for managing and developing of natural resources, and it is also for environmental, agricultural, health, human health, and other concerns. So it is to search hidden mineral deposits. So next comes the National Geophysical Mapping. This is to get the design of exploration strategies. Through maps, this is to get the exploration of design exploration strategies. So the last is the National Aerospace Geophysical Mapping Program. So this is to get the, this uses basically magnetic and spectrometric technologies, and this is to get to see how mineralization actually happens, where it happens, how it happens, and to get the structure, mineral structure as well. So this is all about the National Baseline Geoscience Data Generation Programs, and this is going to be done between the years of 2020 to 2024. That is, before 2024, this whole mapping and getting of data and making this national depository working is going to happen. So this is all about this. These all three are surveys which are to be conducted before 2024. So this is all about today's topic. So let's meet tomorrow with another such session. So thank you.